In this Photoshop tutorial, I want to show you how I made this manipulation. This is the basic composite, just 3 or 4 stock images combined. I'll show you how I get to this, and I want to show how I went from this to the final result, which is this. So I'll show you how to add all these light effects and how to get this effect. I used only 3 stock images for this one, so you will be able to download all of them and try it for yourself. As I said, I combined a few stock images to get this background, and I'll show you how to do that. But I'll skip the part where I cut the woman and some of the objects that I get here, like this watch here and this instrument. So I'll skip that part. I'll give you links to tutorials where I show how to cut things out of the background if you don't know how to do that. But well, let's get started. So I'll close this document. I'll use a smaller canvas size. This one is quite big. It's 3500 pixels, so I'll probably make the PSD file smaller because premium members can download this PSD file from the website, but I'll probably reduce it to 2000 pixels because the file size is huge. It's almost 300 megabytes, so I'll probably make it a bit smaller. So I'll close this and start again. So I'll start with the same canvas size, and then I'll make it smaller, just because I want to keep the same proportions. And let's leave the resolution to 300 pixels per inch and click OK. And I'll press Ctrl Alt and I to open the image size, and I'll make it smaller to about 2000 pixels because I'm also recording the video. So maybe even smaller. Let's go to 1800. As usually, I start with the background when I make manipulations. A lot of people ask me, how do I start? Well, basically I start using the background images, because I create the background and then I select models and objects that I want to add on the scene. And for this one I used this 3 stock images to make the background, and I'll open them with Photoshop. Start with this one, with this lake, so I'll copy it and paste it here. I'll have to make it smaller because remember that I used a smaller canvas size. So I'll probably have to reposition this, but I'll make the rough composition here. And this is the rocks where that woman was standing. I extracted the rocks from the background using the magnetic lasso tool. I made a tutorial showing you how to use this tool, and I said that I use it as an alternative to the pen tool. Some people told me that, well, they said the pen tool is better than this, and I agree, it's very good, and the quality of the edges using the pen tool is really good, but this one is also really good, and for my standards is okay, and on top of that is a lot quicker than the pen tool. Of course I still use the pen tool, but for selections like this one on high resolution images, I can use the magnetic lasso tool. You can see that the edges are very well defined, and I can select that really easily. If you want to zoom out, you can press the Alt and space, so you can zoom out like that, and now you can select this part a lot quicker. And don't worry about those edges, we'll fix them. Once you make the selection, click the layer mask icon, and I'll press Ctrl I to invert it because I want the rocks to be visible, not the sky. And now with the brush tool, I can get rid of these edges here, increase the size, and just paint like that, or use the marquee tool. And I still have this part here, so get the brush tool again, pressing the B key, make it a bit smaller, and mask that bit there. And okay, now we got the rocks. We have this part here which the magnetic lasso tool skipped. Okay, so fix this part. I don't even have to use the refined edge. The quality of the edges is quite good. So select the entire image, go to edit, copy merge. Don't click copy, just click copy merged, or first apply the layer mask and then copy it. And let's close the image of the lake. go back to my canvas, and I'll name this lake, and paste the rocks on top of that. And let's rename this to rocks. And now I can scale it down. I'm going a bit fast here because this is just a standard procedure, so to say. Just rescale images and place them one on top of the other. You should know that. This is really for beginners, and if you don't know how to do that, I have a section called Photoshop for Beginners, where I explain how to cut images and how to work with layers and stuff like that. All we need now is the sky, so open the stock image of the sky and select all with Control A, Control C to copy, Control W to close. So you can see that working with keyboard shortcuts, it's really saves you a lot of time. And we place the sky between the lake, under the lake layer. Let me delete the background layer, I don't need it. Let's name this sky, and of course I'll have to make it smaller. If you want to constrain the proportion, you have to press and hold the shift key while you resize. That way you keep the image, you keep the proportions of the image. And all we need to do now is on the lake layer, we need to mask this sky and reveal this other sky, which is here. So create the layer mask for the lake, select it first, click the layer mask icon, and I use the radial tool, the gradient tool, sorry, and select the black to white, click OK, select the linear type, and let's drag a gradient from here, pressing the shift key to create a straight line like that. You can see it snaps at 15 degrees. I want to have a straight line, and let go there, maybe from higher. So from the base of this grass here, or wherever these plants are, something like that. And of course we need to fix this, but we can now flip the sky. So load the free transform with Control T on the sky layer, and right click and select flip horizontal, because I need the brightest part, that the light to come from this part here. So and now drag it up, something like that. And now I'll get the brush tool and fix this part here. So make sure you have a soft brush, set the opacity and the flow to 100%, and paint with white, not with white, not with black. And just paint like that. Make it smaller here, and this part is it's a bit more difficult, so we have to be careful with it. Just zoom in, use a smaller brush, and switch to black, and just cover this part, make it a bit bigger. You can see that parts of the treetops are also masked, but we will fix that. We'll make another pass with the white color to bring them back. Okay, so here you can leave this this brighter part, because that's where that other part starts there. So you can leave that there, or use a bigger brush and just make a pass like so. Maybe even bigger, like that. Okay. Here we will have the sun and some glow of light, and we will cover part of it, so don't worry too much about that. And now, as I said, I'll make another pass with a smaller brush, switch the color to white, because I want to bring back the top of the trees. Oops, something went wrong there. Okay, so just I need a smaller brush. You can use the magnetic lasso tool or the magic wand or the quick select tool if you want to select the edges of the trees, but I think with the soft brush it's enough. Just make sure you don't have too much of that yellow sky like that, because it's not looking nice, but just a bit of glow there. I don't think it's looking that bad. And even if you lose a bit of the treetops, it's not really that visible. Anyway, that's just if you want to take time to make a perfect selection, you can do that. But I just showed you how I did that. And I think I have too much light here, so I'll mask this part as well. Okay, so that's how you refine the mask using the soft brush tool. So that's the background that we have. This is the base of the artwork, and then you can go ahead and add the woman. So as I said, I'll skip this part where I cut it, but I'll just give you. I use the pen tool in this case, but you can use other tools. I use the pen tool because here there's not too much contrast, and the magnetic lasso tool is not going to do a good job here. So I spent some time using the pen tool. And what you do with the pen tool, in case you don't know, is select the pen tool, make sure to select this to path, and maybe the options that you have here are a bit different. I'm using Photoshop CS6, but you have the option here on the left side to switch to path or shape. Set it to path, and just what you do is zoom in on the image. If you press the caps lock key, you can change the cursor and just paint a path like that. If you click and drag, you can adjust the points and make it curved, and just draw a path around the woman like so, and just just to draw the path around her. I'm going to go really fast now just to show you what I did. It takes about 10 minutes maybe to draw the path, but it's well worth it because the quality of the edges is really good, as I said. So, and when you get to the hair, just leave some space there. We will mask that with the soft brush. And here on this part of the hair, I went really on the edge, like so. This part is really important, so when you get here, make sure you adjust that perfectly, because the part of the face that is visible is really small, so you have to make sure you get it right, like so. And when you get to the start point, just click on the first point, you close the path, right click and select make selection, and set feather to 0, click OK. And when you get the selection, click the layer mask icon, and you mask the background. And then you can right click, apply layer mask, copy the image and paste it on your canvas. I will now open the extracted version that I already have, which is this one, and what I did is just flip her horizontally because I want her to look into the light there, and select the rock layer, press Ctrl V to paste her, and you can see that I masked her hair. Let me show you that. I used the soft brush to mask that part of the hair, and I'll now make it smaller like so, just a bit bigger, something like that, to about there. Her head should reach the tree line there, more or less, and leave some space on that part of the canvas to paint some shadows later. And let's name this woman. Okay, now that we have the most important elements here on the canvas, we can start making adjustments to this. And I started with making some general adjustments affecting the background, so I can hide the woman layer for now, just because I want you to focus on the background. and I just added 2 gradient maps for this. The first gradient map, I used the black and white color set to 50% on multiply, so choose the multiply blend mode and set the opacity to 50%. And then I added another gradient map, and I used a blue and orange color, something like that, an unsaturated blue, and a yellow color like this, an orange, and set the blend mode of this one to soft light, and I set the opacity to 60%, and that way we get that mood, because I want to create that sort of sunset effect. So with this gradient map I give color and also some contrast, and with this one I darken, with the black and white I darken the image. And at this point you can see the masked, the parts that you didn't mask really well on the lake layer, so you can get the brush tool and refine the mask if you need to. So you can use a soft brush and just mask parts of the sky that are too visible. That's why I said it's not really important to this part here, because we will darken that and it's not going to be very visible. So you can skip parts of the treetops if you want to. Just use a big soft brush, and that way it's not really that visible. Okay, so I still have some parts here. Okay. The next thing that I wanted to do is darken the rocks, and I used the layer styles for that, and I also added some light effects, you'll see. The first layer style that I applied is the gradient overlay, and I used some custom colors. I used again the same unsaturated blue, something like that, and also another unsaturated yellow, just like on that gradient map, something similar to that. Set the angle to about 70 degrees, more or less, because I want the light to come from that part, and this part, as you can see, it's darker, so it will be darker. The style that I use is linear, and I use the blend mode hard mix, and you have to reduce the opacity. Let's try 20%, and you can see the effect before and after. It adds more contrast, a bit more color as well. If it's not looking right, just change the colors. The most important part here is not the color itself, of course use unsaturated colors, is how bright the colors are, because the hard mix works with the intensity of the color, the luminosity value. So for the shadows you use a dark color like this, and for the highlights use a brighter color like this, yellow for example, but also don't saturate it too much. You can see it's not looking too nice. Use something like this, a color like this. And then I wanted to create some rim shadow, some rim light, sorry, on this part, because the sun hits this part of the rocks, and I used inner shadow like I always do when I want to create this kind of lights. So set the light to come from that part. The blend mode that I use for this kind of lights is color dodge, and an unsaturated yellow like that. Of course that one is too strong. If you see the color is too strong, just use darker tone like so. And I'll have to increase the distance and of course the size to make it smoother, and maybe add more saturation and just a bit brighter. Okay, something like that. It's a bit too strong. Okay, so that's the light effect there. It's not really visible, but in the end details like this will make the difference. Once you apply those styles, click OK, and these are all the styles that I applied to the rocks layer. Again, before and after. It just adds more light on this part, and that's what I want, because as you can see the light is here, also we have light here, and all this part here is darker, so that's what I wanted. So let's go with the woman now. I'll reactivate this layer. The first thing I'll do is create some shadows, so create a new layer. If you want to create the layer below the layer that you selected, if you press and hold the control key and click this layer icon, it will create the layer under the currently selected layer. So I'll name this shadow and get the brush tool. Use a soft brush, not really big because I want to make the shadows here, and I'll change the opacity to 40% and the flow as well, and just paint some shadows like that, just on the edges. And also here. As you can see, I'm painting with the soft. Most of the brush is on the inside, and just the soft brush touches the edge there, and that's what I want, because I want that soft shadow, the soft part of the brush to touch the to be visible. And once you get that shadow on the edges, you can increase the brush size quite a bit and reduce the opacity even more to about 20%, and just paint again to build up the intensity of the shadow. Make the brush a bit smaller, just make a few passes like so. And of course, for this to look more realistic, you have to create some shadows on the dress itself. So create a new layer and right click and select create clipping mask and name it body shadows, for example. And with the same brush intensity and flow, just paint some shadows on the dress itself, maybe increase the opacity a bit. And paint some shadows just on this side only. And also here on the bottom as well. As you can see, all these highlights, and that's not looking too nice because, as I said, she's looking right there into the light. So this part of her body should be darker. We'll have to fix this part of the hair, but we'll get to that a bit later. For now, just create that shadow there. You can try blend modes as well if you want to. Let's see, maybe soft light. Well, that looks nice. And let's try overlay. Well, let's leave it on soft light. You can leave it on normal as well if you want to. But soft light looks nice to me. On the original, I don't remember what blend mode I used. Maybe I don't even use a blend mode. I think I left it on normal. Next, we need to add layer styles to the woman as well, to the woman layer, because we need to make her, to blend her with the background. And I used 2 layer styles. The most important one is the gradient overlay, because as I said, I painted those shadows there, but if that's not enough, or if you don't want to paint them, you can use the gradient overlay just like we did with the rocks, and you can see the effect. I used black to transparent, so if you don't see that there, you can cancel that, reset the colors to black and white, go back to the layer styles, and when you click here, you will see the black to transparent. I used an angle of 0 degrees, and the scale I set it to 55. The scale controls the transition, you can see that there. The bigger the scale, the smoother the transition. So I set it to 55. And set the opacity to 40%. And you can see that adds even more shadow. It's stronger here and then it fades out because of this scale option. If you want to fade it out even more, you can use increase the scale, just you can move the gradient around. But sometimes, I don't know why, I cannot do that. So if I want to move the gradient, I have to close that, click OK, double click, and now I can move the gradient, as you can see. I don't know why I cannot do that sometimes. I have to close it and open it again. If someone knows why that happens, you can post a comment, because I don't know. Once you have that, well, we have to add the light effect like we did on the rocks. So again, use inner shadow. Set this to this unsaturated yellow. Change the blend mode to color dodge. And you can see that the light is a bit too strong. If you want to make it softer, you can increase the size, like so. I'll have to zoom in, so I'll click OK. I'll zoom in a bit to see it better. And maybe desaturate the color, only leave some light there. And let's uncheck use global light because I don't want to affect the other layers. I use that global light on the rocks, so I don't want to. If I leave this to global light and change this, you'll see the light changing on the rock as well. See there? And I don't want to do that, so I'll set this back to, I think it was at 28, and disable that. And now I can move this freely, and I only affect this layer. Okay, something like that. The distance is okay. A bit more distance and less size, and a darker color because I don't want that much light. Distance too big, size softer. Okay, that's the effect. It's very just adds a bit of light on that part of the face and on the hand, which is what we want, but I need a more saturated color just a bit. Okay. Now, more adjustments to the woman. We need to add a hue saturation adjustment. If you have this as a clipping mask, if you want to add another clipping mask, what you can do is select the woman layer, click this icon and select hue saturation, and it will add that as a clipping mask automatically. And set this to -30 because I want to desaturate the woman. And we need the clipping mask because, as I said, I only want to affect the woman. And then another adjustment layer, gradient map, another blue to orange. And for this ones I have the exact color value. For the shadows is this dark blue. And for the highlights, the color code is this orange. Click OK. And click OK. So this is also created as a clipping mask. And the blend mode that I used for this is soft light at 50%, because leaving it at 100% is too strong, and you can see the effect. It just adds even more contrast, so it makes the shadows a bit darker and the highlights a bit brighter, not too much. So it mostly affects the shadows and adds a bit more color. So these are the two adjustments that I used for the woman. The next thing that I did is add some details, and I added a pocket watch and this instrument, and as I said, I have them extracted from the background, so I'll open them. This is the pocket watch, so select all. I extracted them using the pen tool, so I just show you how to do that, and paste it here. This one's a bit too big, so I'll have to make it smaller with a free transform tool, something like that. Place it here. You can rotate it a bit if you think it's not looking too nice, and there. And let's name this to watch. And of course I created some shadows for this as well. Create a new layer, and I used the two kind of shadows for this. The first one is soft shadows, which I painted with the brush tool, as I did with the woman. So I'll zoom in, increase the hardness of the brush just a bit, and I just want to paint some shadows right under the watch, where it touches the rocks there, and I'll paint some shadows, like so. So you just paint with the soft part of the shadow. You can see that the brush is on the inside of the watch. I'm not painting like that. So something like that. Increase the hardness even more, because this is a quite hard shadow and just barely visible. Like so. And now you can decrease the hardness of the brush, increase the brush size, not too much, and decrease the opacity a bit. So basically it's the same process as with the woman. Maybe increase the brush, the opacity even more. Working with low opacities is really a good thing because you can build up the intensity and you can see what you do. So that's the shadow of the clock. And the second type of shadow is using the watch itself. So you can duplicate that layer. If you press and hold the Alt key, click on the layer and drag it under the soft shadows or on top of it, it doesn't really matter. And now you can see I have a duplicate of that. And select this. Once you have this layer selected, press Ctrl U to load the hue saturation and decrease the lightness to 0. And now that copy, which is under the watch layer, is black. It's just a silhouette of it. And we need that because we need to distort that. So press Ctrl T to load the free transform. Right click and select Distort. And click on this point here and drag it down like that. And then click this one here, place it there, and just adjust that. And make sure you match the direction of the light. So I have to place it somewhere here. Maybe drag this corner like that. This one here. Make it a bit larger, like so. And when you're happy with that, press Enter to accept the change. You can use the arrow keys to position this wherever you want. And what I did is apply the Gaussian blur filter to it because I wanted to make it a bit softer. So go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian blur, and just add a few pixels of blur. Depending on the canvas size, I applied 2 pixels, and then just decrease the opacity to, let's see, about 60% or something like that. Yeah, 60%, 65% works nice. And that's how I created the shadow for this pocket watch. If you want to be a bit more realistic, you can create some shadows like we did on the woman, like we did with the body shadows. Paint the bottom part of the watch, the part that is opposite to the sun. So you can paint this part with black with a really low opacity brush to make it darker, like so. And notice that I made it as a clipping mask, so I can name this, well, anyway, let's delete that. Watch body, well, we need to include the shadow word. So that adds a bit more realism to it, before and after, but that's details. Okay, now let's add that instrument. So again, I have it extracted from the background. You can extract this really easy using the magnetic lasso tool. It's really quick, and you can see that the edges are really good, so don't worry too much about it. You can use that tool if you don't want to spend time using the pen tool. And I'll make it a bit smaller, and I placed it here, like so. Maybe it was a bit bigger, but try to keep the proportions, don't make it too big. Also, that pocket watch is a bit big, but anyways, you can place this violin here and just scale it down, something like that, just to have a reference point. You can put it next to the woman and see more or less how big it is. And let's place it here. Also, be careful where the light hits. You can see this part is brighter and this part is in shadow, so you have to put it like that. If it's flipped, it's not looking nice, because you can see that that the light is coming from the right side, and you have the shadow also on the right side, so that's not right. So make sure you have the bright part on the right side. Let's put that there, and let's name this violin. And I have to make some shadows for this as well, but we'll do that after we make the adjustments. So let's make the adjustments for this layer as well. Again, I used layer styles. The first layer style that I used is the gradient overlay. Again, black to transparent. And I used an angle of about 55 degrees. And I changed the blend mode to soft light and the opacity to about 80% or 90. Let's leave it to 90%. The next layer style that I applied is the color overlay, and I used a dark brown for that, something like that. Click OK, and I set the blend mode to soft light again at 45%. And you can see that it's not looking nice. It's too saturated. The contrast is too high, and that's why I had to use a hue saturation adjustment as clipping mask. So add a hue saturation, and if you press the Alt key and click, you can see you can create or release the clipping mask, and reduce the opacity until you get something like this, about -70, and that way it looks a lot better. It blends in with the background a lot better. Now let's make that shadow that I said. I use the brush tool for that. You can use a soft brush. You don't have to make any shapes here, just darken this part here, but increase the opacity a bit and the flow. And use a big soft brush and just paint some shadows like that. Make this one smaller. Maybe decrease the opacity a bit when you get here, and to make that kind of contact shadow that I've made on the watch, I'll use a smaller brush and paint something like that. Okay, so that's my shadow there. One more stroke, like so. So basically paint the shadow on this part here, not here. On the left side of the instrument, and use low opacity brushes. And let's see a before and after. It looks a lot more realistic now. You can also paint some shadows on the instrument itself if you want to darken this part, like so. But well, let's leave it like that. One other thing we need to do is fix the hair of the woman. And for that I used some painted hair that I used on other tutorials. I used this PSD file. It's a great stock resource. I'll give you the link to that. It's from DeviantArt. It's really good. Thank you to the author that made this, because I'm really horrible at painting and these are really good. So select this hair, select the woman layer. If you want to select the woman layer, you can select the move tool, press and hold the control key and click on the woman, and you can see it selects the woman. And create the layer under it. I'll create a group which I'll call hair, and in this layer I'll paste that hair that I copied. I'll make it smaller and rotate it a bit and just put it here. Zoom in a bit and just put it there, like so. And of course we have to adjust that, and you can use hue saturation for that. Press Ctrl U to load the hue saturation, select the colorize option, increase the saturation so that you can see the color that you select, and select this kind of orange. Now decrease the opacity back and decrease the lightness as well, and just try to match the color of the hair. Increase the opacity, the saturation, sorry. Maybe increase the lightness a bit, something like that. And you can also use levels, pressing Ctrl L, and you can further control the darkness of the hair. And once you're happy with that, you can press Ctrl J to duplicate. Maybe flip it horizontally so that you have different different strands of hair, move it down and duplicate again, maybe make it a bit smaller and place it here. I didn't really match that color. I didn't do a really good job on that, but just take your time. Anyways, you can use also gradient maps for that, or just go to the layer styles, select color overlay, pick and just sample a color from the hair and something like that, and maybe change the blend mode to soft light and play with the opacity. And I have to use the eraser tool to erase this part here. And also I almost forgot that we have to fix this part here. And well, of course you can use another hair like this one, copy it and paste it on the same group here, make it smaller, and you can place some of the hair on this part of the head as well, like so. And again, use hue saturation, so press Ctrl U to load that. Check colorize. This one is really light, the color, so we have to decrease the lightness and change the color to match the color of her natural hair. And maybe use levels, click OK. Maybe use levels also to make it a bit darker. Maybe I'll desaturate it a bit, so open hue saturation again. Something like that. So that's how I fixed the hair. Of course you can do a better job here if you take a bit more time to adjust that hue saturation adjustment. Okay, let's fix that part of the hair that I said. So I have all these clipping masks here for the woman, and I'll create another one under the body shadows, and I'll name this hair fix. I'll set the blend mode to soft light, and I'll use a soft brush like that. Leave the opacity to about 30 or 40%, and I'll sample a color from the hair, a brown color like this one, and just paint over the hair on this part here where it's too bright, and maybe the color is too saturated. So maybe use a more unsaturated brown color like that. I'll delete that and do it again. Maybe increase the opacity a bit as well. Okay, so just paint that part of the hair, because you can see it was too bright. Okay, so that's how I fixed the hair. So that's basically it. Another final adjustment that I did to this is, once you're done with all of this, select the top layer and add a black and white adjustment. And I'll give you the values that I used here. You can use other values if you want. I used 60, 83, 69, 58, and -10. These are just to control the brightness of each color. You can see it here. And these are the values that I used. You can use other values, as I said, if you want to. And I set this to multiply. And the opacity here, I set it to 50%, but you can adjust that to whatever you like. Basically, it makes the whole scene a bit darker. So depending on how you set the opacity here, you control the amount of darkness that you want. About 50% is okay. And one thing that I forgot to add is that sun effect there, the glow of light. We can do that now on top of all these layers. Again, I used my lens flares. I'm a bit lazy, so I used lens flares again, and I like them. I like how they look, so you can use the lens flares. Let's go to the lens flares, You can use the V1 pack, it's free, so you can download that if you want to. I used one from the premium pack as well, but anyway, someone complained that on the premium pack they purchased that pack and they have this watermark here. It's really easy to cover that. Just select it and fill that with black and it's gone. No problem with that. That's why I placed it there, because I know it wouldn't bother. Paste that under the black and white adjustment. Set the blend mode to screen so that that black background goes away. Place it somewhere here. Let's name this sun flare. And then to add more emphasis to that, I painted a glow of light myself, so I created a new layer and let's name this glow. And I set the blend mode to screen and use the big soft brush, but set the opacity and the flow to 100%. Let me zoom out a bit. I'll increase the brush size. Someone asked me why I keep right clicking to change the brush size. I do that. I usually use the keyboard shortcuts like that, but I want you to see the size that I'm using and hardness, and it's a lot easier for you to see that. And for this glow of light, I'll use a really dark orange, almost red color, like that, and make the brush bigger, not that big, about that, and just click once. And I don't like how it looks because the color, you can see it's almost not even visible. That's because the color is too dark, so use a brighter color. And maybe I'll make the brush to 1000 pixels and paint again. That's the glow of light there, so it makes it look a bit more interesting. You can use my dust particles stock. It's free on my website. You can download that. Select these particles here, copy them and paste them here. Change the blend mode to screen again, and that way you have some particles there if you want them, and apply maybe some Gaussian blur just to add some particles there, some texture on the air. If you want, it's just an idea, maybe to simulate some bugs or who knows, something like that. And if you want, you can also use that lighting effects filter. You can create a stamp like I do with my manipulations, but in this case I didn't do that. I think I don't remember, but that's how I got this effect. On the final result, I also used that topaz detail filter, but you can get a similar effect if you create a stamp pressing Ctrl Shift Alt and E and go to filter, sharpen, unsharp mask, and use a high radius and just use a low amount, and that way you get more sharpness, and maybe you can desaturate the image a bit, or like so, and maybe use color balance. So these are just the final adjustments you can do to get different looks on your image. And maybe add more cyan on the midtones. Well, actually let's reset that and go to the shadows. Add some cyan on the shadows and some blue, and on the midtones and highlights some red and yellow. And that's a different look that you can get to your image, just adding some more adjustments. That's all for today. This was the manipulation tutorial that I wanted to show you. I hope you liked it, and if you did, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can also visit my website because I have there other tutorials that are not on YouTube. So well, that's all for today. Thank you for watching and see you next time.